You're listening to a Wave Zine podcast.
Hello. Welcome to the show. I am one half of your host. I am Mason Zeller.
And I am Kyle Himmeline, and this is the very first episode, actually the very first podcast that is commercially available from Wave Zine, which is FITE CLUB. Ding, ding, ding. Pew, pew, pew. Podcast where we take your favorite artists, directors, authors, and discuss them, but not their best stuff. We're going to be talking about their controversial, their divisive, their polarizing works with the fans who love them and the fans who hate them.
It's going to get loud. It's going to get abrasive, and maybe a little violent. Who knows? Some blood might be spilled digitally as of right now.
But later it'll be actual blood.
Yeah, later it'll be
right.
very red.
If somebody doesn't
blood.
throw fists, then I'm going to personally cancel the podcast.
But hopefully by the end of the discussion, we have a better understanding of why fans are so heated about each topic that we are talking about.
Right. And today we figured we start off with the cream. What's the saying?
Cream of the crop.
Cream of the crop. With an artist who not only makes controversial music, but has a controversial presence in American pop culture.
You're probably thinking about it right now, and your guess is probably right. It is obviously the man himself, Kanye West. But before we get into that, we need to introduce our fire themselves.
Let's get him in here. All right.
In the blue corner, we have a man who has been illiterate until the 10th grade. He did not know how to read and write until he was taught by his teacher.
Expressed only in grunts and what was it?
Crying like a baby.
Crying like a baby. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have Colin, the illiterate Brunson.
Ding, ding, ding. Ah, ooh, goo goo gaga, grug grug, let's go.
And in the red corner, we have a man who recently benched 500 pounds. And I hope you can't tell who wrote this script. We have Jake the Snake David.
Yow! Lightweight, baby! I'm really glad you guys got the copy I sent you before the...
Yeah. We didn't do any proofreading, actually, so sorry if we sound a little bit biased, but that's the business.
I think you actually wrote like 100 pounds. It may have been a little typo. We said 500.
No,
I'm not sure. Oh, that's correct? Okay,
I think it was actually 5.00 pounds is
no.
actually what it was. The decimal was.
It was 500.
Actually, I think it was 5. Actually, I think it was 5 ounces.
Okay.
Okay, so first off,
but what are we talking about?
Yeah,
why are we talking about Kanye?
Yeah,
what about
let's
Kanye
give a little introduction.
makes an interesting debate?
So it's going to be hard to introduce the guy who's literally been on a show called My Next Guest Needs No Introduction. But here we go. Kanye started off. He did a lot of stuff. I mean, he supposedly wrote poetry according to his Wikipedia page at the age of 5, but it wasn't until 2003 in which he actually became a household name as a rapper with College Dropout. Do you want to talk about that at all, Mason?
Yeah, so in the early days, Kanye revolutionized hip-hop by bringing together pop productions and old samples of jazz, soul, and R&B with classics, along with clever lyricism and progressive experimental production. In his early days, you may know songs like Jesus Walk, Through the Wire...
Buy me a spaceship.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah, space. Yeah, he has so many just like old classical productions that you can take and sample and turn into songs that you know and love currently.
In short, he changed the game completely. He mostly
multiple times.
Yeah, I think in the beginning he probably is best known for bringing pop to hip hop. He's kind of the first guy. Before a lot of people think Drake kind of did this first, but Kanye was kind of the first guy to do like singing and like auto-tune over hip-hop, especially with 808s and Heartbreaks, which was a later album in his discography.
And the pop album of Graduation in
right,
2006.
And yes, absolutely. Graduation is probably where he was most successful with bringing pop to hip-hop, I'd say. But yeah, anyways, with each new album, Kanye, he pushes the envelope, and not only in production and not only in songwriting, but in free speech, and I say free speech with quotes, in general. He plunges himself into controversy basically every year. I can't think of a year where Kanye didn't make a headline.
From whether it's taking responsibility for Taylor Swift's success at the VMAs.
Yep. Or no, even that was when he wrote in the song. He's like, "I made that bitch famous."
He did say that.
When after he shit on her.
Off of T-Lop. Yeah,
Right.
he talked about getting assholes bleached on his T-shirt.
Right.
Which I think is an everyday thought in most people. Yeah. But yeah, even in recent years though, he's been caught wearing a MAGA hat. And even as of this year, he said he's running for president. He's been taken off the ballot in Wisconsin, so we'll see how successful that campaign is. But the general idea is that it's hard to even explain to someone who doesn't know Kanye why he is so infamous, which is so good since everybody knows Kanye and everyone knows what he does at this point. He's in the headlines almost every other day. So
right. Today we're gonna focus on his music, and specifically his most recent release, which was very controversial amongst the fans, which was Jesus is King. And obviously Kanye has had controversial releases. Life of Pablo kind of was weird because it was all digital and it was edited a bunch. You can't even get the real original release of that album since it's all digital. You can't actually there's no physical copies commercially available, at least. But Jesus is King is probably the most controversial, I would say, at least with his fan base. And that's why we brought two Kanye boys here with us today. As we introduced them earlier, we have Colin Brunson, who is... how do you feel about this album, Colin? Let's give just a brief take.
How do I feel about Jesus is King? I mean, it's it's not an album that's easy to dilute your take down on because it's so complex in so many ways and so wrapped up in so many other things. But to keep it short and sweet, I am definitely in the pro Jesus is King camp. I think it's a good album and a worthwhile entry into Kanye's discography.
Absolutely. All right. Good to hear. Jake Davis, a little birdie tells me that you maybe do not feel that way. Why don't you vocalize that?
Yeah, honestly, in hindsight and retrospect, and in getting ready for this podcast and re-listening to the album, I did find that there were some positive qualities about it that I did initially overlook, but I still stand by my initial takeaway of the album in that for a discography that's marked by pretty intense introspection and
self-awareness, I would say, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. I would say it falls short in those regards, and musically speaking, it might be his weakest album.
Musically speaking. Okay, interesting. All right. So now that we've got everything squared away, let's get into specifically why you guys feel that way.
Why don't we lay down our opening arguments? Colin, you want to start first? Round one. Ding, ding.
We got to get a bell, dude.
Insert
bing the sound. Yeah, we'll do that in post.
That'll be put in post, yeah.
All right, yeah. Colin, go ahead. Give us your pro Jesus is King. And you can talk about anything from production, songwriting, whatever you want to talk about first. Let's get into it.
All right. Opening statements. Yeah, I mean, I think there are two approaches at deconstructing Jesus is King as a project. The number one is going to be your sonic approach. That's looking at stuff like beats, looking at stuff like mixing, looking at stuff like instrumentals, looking at stuff like background vocals, which, more often than not play more of an aesthetic role in building the sound of the album than they necessarily do in getting a point across. In those terms, in sonic terms, out of the 11 tracks on this album, maybe one I can even make an argument for as being weak on sonic aesthetic.
Which one is that,
the
Colin?
Instrumentals.
Which one is that, Colin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the instrumental on Closed on Sunday for the most part, but I think every single other instrumental on the album is totally up to par with the standard of Kanye's discography. I mean, maybe there's not a track on Jesus is King that is on the level of Real Friends or an Ultralight Beam or something, right? But those things we have to remember at the end of the day are standouts among standouts in one of the best artists of all time's discography. So asking something to be at that level constantly is a lot. And again, instrumentals on this album, for the most part, on almost every track, are honestly really excellent. really, really, really good. And Kanye makes a lot of in my opinion, correct choices in creating this mix between like pulling the best parts out of the aggressive hip hop aesthetic that he likes to lean into sometimes and mixing it with gospel themes and ideas and sonic aesthetics and really coming together into a cohesive project. And a lot of the instrumentals, I think, when they're at their best, echo stuff that we've already seen and accept is really excellent in Kanye's discography. I mean, Jesus Walks could easily show up on this album if it weren't for some of the cursing in there, but like has the exact same kind of like focus on
no way.
The kind of
there's no way. Jesus Walks is such a well-written song, dude. And all the songs, not all the songs, but so many of the songs on this album are just, in my opinion, kind of lazily written. You can tell that he's been leaning more towards his write it in 5 minutes and let everyone else figure out the production.
Hold on. So you say lazy writing. By that, do you mean like his lyricism or like everything?
Lyricism.
Like his production?
Well,
lyricism. Okay.
Honestly, both. I will say Colin was kind of going somewhere in that this album does borrow a lot, I think, from his previous, more contemporary work. But I would argue that it does have the best aspects. If those best aspects were watered down and not really well mixed, and overall less interesting and complex. I think if you look at an album like The Life of Pablo, incredibly interesting production-wise, something that I think like ages better every year. I will say this, there are definitely some things that I was surprised. There were some songs on this album that I was like surprised with how well they aged. Water being, I think, the chief among them. That one, I think is cool. I'm not even going to like try to shit on Water. I think Water. I'm not even gonna like try to go in the toilet on that one.
Right. That's interesting about Water, and I want to get into Mason's point, which he wanted to talk about Jesus Walks, I think, and older Kanye production. But another thing about Water is a lot of people, that seems to be just on the album a really polarizing song. Case in point, Fantano's review of the album was that was his, I believe, favorite album or song on the album, though.
I don't get how people can't like Water. That song, the instrumental is impeccable. Ant Clemens delivers such an excellent performance on the album.
And you know what?
It's weird.
I'm going to break form right now, like in like the debate format, and like start with like a concession by saying this. My entire issue with Jesus is King is that it's an album that has been in a long time coming. I think even if you've been following Kanye since he first began, and if you were like, oh my god, Jesus Walks, heck yeah, my homie, this rules. Like, sure, great. I think the problem is that in a lot of regards, it's not, I don't buy it, and I don't think there's really any depth to it. But the closest it comes to having any real depth is Water, because I think it really does earnestly kind of talk about, and I'm going to sound extremely corny saying this because I'm like, a pretty secular Jew. But it really, I think, like goes into detail about the healing power of Christ, why he chose to find a spirituality in the first place, and that I think is the closest that this album comes to actually kind of saying, okay, here's how we got here. Because the rest of the album, in my opinion, is just Kanye being like, I'm a Christian now. I'm the coolest Christian. I'm gonna make Christianity cool.
Oh, I so disagree. I wrote a full page just about hands-on, and I'm gonna get it. We're gonna get into some shit here.
We're gonna get into hands-on, because I think hands-on is either the salvation of this album or its damnation. I'm more of the opinion that it's his damnation, and it's not.
How could it be the damnation?
Because I understand the point of that song when he first dropped it, because when he first dropped it, he was asking for everyone's benefit of the doubt, saying, okay, listen, I understand up until now, I've not acted like a model Christian, but give me a shot. Let me prove this to you guys. And in the past year, he has done nothing to prove that to anyone, in my view. And I think that's the main thing is when you're looking at Kanye West as an artist and as like at his art, you have to understand that his life is part of his art, possibly more than any other rapper or contemporary musician in like the modern era. And I think him failing, in my view, to kind of hold up. I think like if you're running a presidential race, like during this time, like where we need like I'm not gonna get political. I don't want to get political, but I'm just saying if you're going to run a presidential race, kind of out of completely ego, which I think we can all agree that's kind of what it's about. I don't think that's selfless, and I don't think that's Christian. And I know I'm not the guy to like say, oh yeah, dude, I'm gonna say what's Christian or not, but I do think like you can't. It's inalienable.
This is so. Here's the thing though, the Kanye verse on Hands On definitely is okay. Let me prove this to you. But then Fred Hammond's verse is actually directly addressing your criticism, right? Because the whole point of both that song and the album is that walking in the path of Christ and being a good Christian is a lifelong process. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is perfect at it. Jesus wasn't perfect at it. It is, you're going to slip, you're going to fall, and then this wraps then into the reason why Use This Gospel is a perfect follow-up to Hands On, because you get Pusha and No Malice who come on and deliver verses specifically about how they fucked up in life and they made bad decisions, they made immoral steps and immoral actions, and yet at the same time they're still welcomed into heaven at the end of the day because they are willing to recognize and accept Christ's love and like, the whole shebang. They work as like a perfect parallel to each other because, again, being a good Christian, and this is something that is walked through on the whole album, is hard. It's hard to be a good Christian, especially when you have a baseline life that's already as batshit insane as someone like Kanye West does, where not only are you the giant, culturally defining, controversial figure that you are, but you're also married to one of the biggest culturally defining controversial figures in American pop culture and part of her family and part of her entire cultural product, which is like trying to just like be a regular good person in that dynamic. I mean, it's difficult for anyone in any walk of life, and it's so difficult with those factors around it.
But the entire thing is it's possible. And one of the issues that I have also with Kanye, it's interesting you say cultural product, and I would agree. This album is a product, like, and everything about it was also a product. And that's not like my opinion, like it's a fact. Like, you can buy merchandise for Jesus is King that is
$140.
What? Yeah, Yeezy priced. Oh, sorry. Wait, what did you say, Mason? I missed you.
Well, no, Well, you talked about Yeezy prices dropping sweaters with a square design.
Right.
That takes about 1/10 up of the sweater, and it's about $150. But continue.
Exactly. I mean, like, or like in my opinion, like again, like okay, sure. I'm not necessarily of the opinion that like a rich man can only enter the kingdom of God through the eye of a camel or whatever the hell that. Oh, sorry. It's easier to put a camel through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God or something like that. That's like something that's said. It's like a proverb or whatever.
Hold on, Jake. I just want to ask about a specific song. Then, what about God Is? Because on multiple parts of that song, he talks about how like all are welcome. Like the specific line is all are welcome through the door. The rich and the poor. Which is like, I feel like sort of a reference to like where Kanye's been in his life.
Exactly.
And especially with the context of like Jesus walks with like earlier in his career, and then now with this huge celebration of Christianity in general on Jesus is King. Like to me, I see your point of like there's definitely parts where you're like, what the hell? Like the man is selling $300 shoes. Like that doesn't seem very like anti-materialistic.
Yeah, but that doesn't take away, like you said, that doesn't take away from the album itself. That
right.
is separate.
Right.
It can be seen as separate from the album.
I think.
What are your thoughts, Jake?
Well, I think at this point we're also kind of arguing the validity of the statement, like, which again, I'm not a theologian or whatever. But like the entire, I guess, like the validity of the statement, like, all the poor and all the rich, can. They're all like allowed to join it. I do think that's
Welcome,
true,
right.
but I also think like that you'd have to take Kanye's word for it. And I also do think like, okay, yeah, you can be rich and you can also be you can also like enter the kingdom of God or whatever, sure. But I think you also have to be willing to change your life in some respect. And I don't think Kanye has really demonstrated that. As a matter of fact, I think he's kind of, even in this Christian phase of his life, done the opposite. I think the fact that he, in all of his, church outreach and stuff, in all of his Sunday services, a ticket costs $90. And, the pastors he's teaming up with, they aren't small indie pastors. They're Joel Osteen. The people who make the McMansion, McMillionaire churches.
You're saying there's just hypocrisy shrouded in what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's saying that he's for everything, but really what he's doing is making a quick buck off the side of everything that is surrounding this album.
I don't think he's
Is that kind of what
intentionally
you're
doing it. I just don't think he has the capacity to understand that he is. I think the way Kanye sees himself.
I think it's totally unfair to make that judgment. Let's go back to Hands On. I mean, the one line that the series of lines that gets repeated 6 times just throughout his verse. What have you been hearing from the Christians? Right. They'd be the first ones to judge me, make it feel like nobody loved me, right? So Kanye clearly has an understanding of the dynamics at play in a lot of modern day Christianity in the US, where people like Joel Osteen are taking advantage of Christian rhetoric to cause divisiveness and create scenarios where people who think that they're acting Christian are really judging others, all kinds of shit, right? Based on politics, race, gender, sexual identity, and generally a lot of American Christians, especially at that level, are just not practicing what they preach. And Kanye's consciously aware about that. He's consciously aware of it through the whole song. So I totally disagree with denying him that agency. And I also think that maybe, we should be taking kind of the semi-cynical perspective on what Kanye's doing by being friends with someone like Joel Osteen, which is taking advantage of the platform that Joel Osteen has and reaching an audience that Joel Osteen has with his message that because he's black, because he's a rapper, and because he has so much baggage with his career, these people would literally never hear in the course of their lives, right? So he's using that much in the same way that
Donald
maybe
Trump.
Joel Osteen is using him. He's using Joel Osteen to bring that message to, and he's using Donald Trump in the same way, right? I mean, he put the MAGA hat on so he could get a meeting with Trump and then get Alice Johnson out of prison and do criminal justice reform, right? That was a conscious move on the part of him and
If I
Kim.
may interrupt, how did that benefit them though? How does putting on a MAGA hat by trying to get Donald Trump to
is it like a means justify the ends justify the means kind of thing, or what do you?
He said he put the hat on to try and free people, but as far as I know, him and Kim have only freed one person, and essentially has wholeheartedly damaged his reputation the past few years.
Actually,
So
I'm going to come to Colin's defense on this one.
In terms of
wait, hold on. I want to come to your defense on this one because he's freed more than one person, and I also do think he has done a lot to bring a pretty unspoken about issue into the popular consensus, and that's the fact that in prisons we effectively do use slave labor. I do think he's done a lot to really bring awareness to that fact. And I don't scorn Kanye West for, using any avenue, using his direct line to the president to try to, affect social change. But I also do think, I kind of want to come back to that line, the Christians would be the first ones to judge me. Sure, that's fine. But I think it's also kind of a lampshade argument in that, pointing out the color of a lampshade doesn't change its color. Right, you can say oh, people are going to judge me and say my faith is disingenuous for this album, and okay, that's fine. Yeah, maybe they will, and if you're willing to, I guess disprove that, if you're able to, then go for it. But I just don't see, you made a point earlier, oh, okay, I'm going to use Joel Osteen's platform to further my own message, my own rhetoric. But I do think there's almost no difference in the rhetoric that Kanye West preaches and the rhetoric that Joel Osteen preaches, especially since they're both so inherently political. I mean, I'd actually really rather not get too into this because I don't want to have a fight club about abortion. I also do think, like, you know, recently, we can talk about what happened recently, like where he was talking about abortion at that rally of his, I think it was.
What did he say there?
Well, he was talking.
It was East Coast. But what was it? What did he say, Jake?
He was talking about how he wanted to abort North and how Kim, I think, refused, and like, you know, I think he had a pretty like genuine and emotionally heartfelt moment where he like had to come to terms with the fact that he never would have had his daughter if it was his call. And I again, like, I'm not trying to like take that away from him, but the religious politics of Kanye West have become relatively, I think, similar to the religious politics of a Joel Osteen type. I don't think he's trying to change Joel Osteen's mind, just like much like how I don't think he was trying to change Trump supporters' minds either, outside of like the 13th Amendment. Like, I do think like it was really funny to see all those longtime Kanye fans who were happy that Kanye was finally speaking the truth about Donald Trump, right? But you know, in my opinion, fake fan. I don't know. I don't want to get into the. Have you guys seen
the video of Kanye West in, like, I think it was whenever Katrina happened. So like, what was that, 2000 something?
Yeah.
He was like,
George
Bush doesn't care about
2005
black
benefit.
people.
George Bush does not care about black people.
Right.
Thank you, Michael Myers.
Right. So
he was
it's
trying
like,
to make Donald Trump care about black people.
that exactly that kind of thing is like, is it like the fact that happened kind of like makes me
On national television,
Right.
They're in the middle, of a charity raise where you have
makes me think
thousands
that
of people watching.
Right. It makes me think that
Millions.
maybe he doesn't have this plan that maybe you're talking about, Colin, which like is that like he's using his political or his cultural power to like make political changes in the way that you're talking about, regardless of the fact that he has he absolutely, you're right, he has freed. How many do you know, Jake? You said it was more than one person, but
Yeah, I don't know. I think
Well,
like 46 or something like that.
With the
okay.
It's been a lot of people. Specifically the one person he freed was Alice Johnson, right? He and Kim petitioning Trump got her sentence commuted, and then actually a couple weeks ago she was just pardoned entirely. But they were also, their lobbying specifically was really instrumental in Trump passing the First Step Act executive order, which is like huge carte blanche for basically all nonviolent drug offenders in the country for getting like stuff expunged from records and
Right.
getting people back out and like back to work and functioning parts of society. I definitely don't think that Kanye is like planning out every step of his moves here. He's clearly always operated very quickly and very emotionally.
Right, emotionally charged, yeah, I would say is kind of the defining thing.
But where I don't think he's like, he definitely doesn't have like a step-by-step master plan of like, oh, I'm going to become friends with Joel Osteen and spread my message to these people, and it's going to do this, and these are the effects. He sees what's in front of him, and he takes advantage of those opportunities. So when he announces like, oh, I'm Christian, we're going to be doing gospel shit, Joel Osteen, being kind of like a vulture, prosperity gospel guy, comes and is like, oh, Kanye West, I'm the big celebrity Christian guy. We're going to do stuff together. And he sees that and he goes like, maybe, obviously I don't know everything that's going on in Kanye's brain, but he sees that and he goes, you know what, this is an opportunity for me to maybe reach some new people that I wouldn't have reached before, because it's possible that people who listen to Joel Osteen might have thought that black people are thugs and unchristian and had no desire to listen to a rapper at any point in their life because it's evil. And he now has that opportunity. He says, okay, I'm going to take advantage of it. And like, he's the kind of guy that doesn't like go, I'm going to get a little bit free speech warrior here. He's the kind of guy that won't like bow to like the wrong thing of like, you shouldn't platform these people, you shouldn't associate with these people, especially when it's like we're talking about him meeting with Donald Trump
Right.
and Joel Osteen, who are some of the richest and most well-known people in this country, irrespective of whether or not Kanye West is giving them the time of day, right? So these people have platforms. If you're given the opportunity to make something good out of them having the platform, maybe more people should be taking that. And I think Kanye, reflexively, as soon as he was given the opportunity, took advantage of them.
That's a good point. And we want to, so, okay, right now we want to kind of tie back to the album Jesus King, which you touched on in your...
So you talked about Joel Osteen and Donald Trump, and maybe Kanye trying to look for a different audience of what he normally has, because he can always rely on his listeners and most of his fans to listen to an album no matter what, even especially this album, which runs much shorter than most of his albums in the 2000s. But if we take it back to his audience, his core audience, do you think being irreligious or just like a non-Christian in any way takes away from the listening experience in general?
Right, because with Kanye West's fan base being, I mean, I would say,
especially
primarily,
like if you start from his first albums and like if you take from that beginning, from College Dropout, and you listen to Jesus is King,
there's clearly a complete shift there,
exactly,
right?
Very much a contrast.
So like, is it?
There's not a lot of Bible thumpers.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So regardless of the politics of like Kanye using his position to garner support from people that he would never ever have gotten support from, because by making a Christian album, do you think it's against the fans that he already has to make an album that's primarily Christian rock, or not Christian rock? Sorry, Christian rap.
Yeah, either you guys can chime in and make your argument.
Like, do you think it's
so
it's against his fans? I guess.
So I had like the experience of actually going to one of his Sunday services back, like around January, and a lot of my issues with like the music, like on the music side of like Jesus is King, completely, in my opinion, like alleviated live. Like, it's like a really cool show musically, but here's the big but.
Before we get off track, could you like just describe like how that show was and and how it made you feel? Yeah.
Well, absolutely.
Elaborate on that.
So absolutely. So I like drove down from San Luis Obispo through LA traffic to get to there, and it was a really, I think, like really cool experience. Like why did I bring up the traffic? I drove all the way down from San Luis Obispo and into LA traffic. The 405.
I got stuck on the 405.
Yeah, it took me 4 or 5 hours to get there. The album, the concert itself, I think, was a mixed bag. So, like, for starters, started pretty late, like later than like initially thought, but
classic of a Kanye show. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Really like beautiful set design too, very green, like it was like a little park almost. Just really like great acoustics. It sounded really great. And he did gospel renditions of Ultralight Beam, Father Stretch My Hands. Lots of really, really cool songs, like deep from his catalog. But I will say also, it wasn't really a Kanye West concert. Like, he performed, I think, 2 or 3 songs. One of which was Closed on Sundays, which we will get to. But Better Live. You know, he had like a he even had like a little rant where he talked about how when he wrote it, and again, I don't want to come across like I'm like questioning the authenticity of his music or of this album, because he says like, yeah, like I literally was like driven to tears in the process of writing this song. I was like on the floor, you know, like writing the song, like ready, like, you know, like just trying to get it perfect. And he said, this is the best song I've ever written, which I think is hilarious because it's, I mean, not hilarious. I just think it's, you know.
No, it is. It is hilarious.
It's pretty hilarious.
I'm not gonna disagree with you on that one. Yeah. There's some corny ass shit on that song.
It is pretty fucking hilarious that he thinks that's his best song. He said, and I think, like, quote, "This is the hardest thing I've ever written. Like, this is the hardest shit ever." So,
like,
Kanye
not hard,
West,
like as in like hard to write, but like as in like it's like
hard,
the, like,
as in
most
this shit
intense.
goes.
Like right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
The concert, the music part of it was great, but there were 3 sermons throughout the entire thing. So 3, like, I want to say 30-minute long sermons cut up through. So it was almost 2 hours or an hour and a half worth of like a church service. It was quite literally a Sunday service.
Right. So getting into does it ruin the listening experience if you're religious? You would say in this scenario, like, it might kind of, this is where you're kind of being like, well, like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I'm not
Like,
Christian, so.
And I'm like, like, maybe call me closed-minded, but I don't know if I'm ready to convert to Christianity at a Kanye West show. Like, because that was the moment. Like, there was like a moment near the end of the concert where, like, like, they came to a halt and, like, just this exhortation: raise your hands up, and like, just let him in. Just, like, fucking do it, man. It feels so like... good. Just do it. And, like, I've never been to a church before, and I'm not gonna, I've barely been to, like, Jew church, but, and I'm not gonna.
Jake, I don't think even just hearing your short description of what this concert was like, it's nothing like church.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Church is very.
It's not true. It's not like church
no.
at all.
Yeah, this sounds very not church-like.
I saw Kim Kardashian walking around. That was weird.
That's nuts.
She, like,
completely sidetrained here. I actually saw her at Disneyland once, and it was really weird.
It's weird to see her in person.
She does not look like she does on TV.
She does not.
No, yeah.
I know.
Not at all.
Sound,
I was like, who the fuck is that?
I'm gonna sound so mean right now, but, like, I was like,
it's not even in a bad way. It's just in a not how you expect.
I'm
gonna
say it in a mean way, like, with, like, with the, like, lush greenery.
Kim Kardashian is ugly as fuck.
With the lush greenery and, like, the, like, like, it almost looked like that part of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, like, where they're in the forest area and you see the Oompa Loompas for the first time.
Shut up! Stop!
It was kind of like that. No disrespect.
Even with
Kim
the
Kardashian.
orangeness to it.
Oh my god, it'd be so funny if, like, we come off of this, like, Fantano drama and, like, we instantly get into drama. We're
on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Like,
oh Jesus Christ! No disrespect, by the way, all in good fun, but. And I also don't want to, like, derail this too much about talking about my epic concert at the Kanye West, but, like, I just will say this, like, okay, we're talking about, like, kind of, like, the demographic, and, like, I do remember, like, seeing this one guy who looked like he was, like, in Pike, like, being like, yeah, dude, I fucking love Jesus, man.
right,
and,
right,
yeah. Afterwards, like, like, probably, like, just kind of shit-faced out of his mind and being like, dude,
at
I
a
fucking
church,
loved
yes.
that, man. I fucking love Jesus now. That shit ruled. And I don't know. I just don't know if, like, you can really say, like, you had your soul saved at a Kanye West show. I mean, sorry, you can say that. I might call bull, but I think, like, you can say that you had your soul saved at a Kanye West show. I don't know.
So you're saying you paid $90 to expect to hear, like, Kanye and like religious music, and it turned out to be
3 songs
at least an hour and a half of preaching and a few Kanye songs mixed in there.
Yeah, which is really just more of, it was still a good concert. I would still give it like a pretty
but
review,
you're paying
concert.
$90 to what you expect of Kanye, to essentially for Kanye to hope that you're converted by the end of the show, which which can be seen as extremely disingenuous.
Not disingenuous.
Yeah.
I just think, like, I think, like, when it comes to, like, like mob mentality almost, like, it does seem a little, not culty, but just creepy, I guess. Like, the entire, like, all right, I want every single one of you to put up your hands, and, like, everyone's putting their hands up. And, like, especially coming from Kanye, who is, like, such a proponent for individual thought.
So I think the point you're getting at, Jake, is that yes, it does take away from the listening experience if you're non-Christian or religious, because you can't possibly have the same experience that a person who is Christian would have, because it's tailored towards them, which I definitely think is a valid criticism of the album, and especially like from the perspective of his fans, like his atheist fans, his non-Christian fans. Like, it's hard to and also, I mean, you can get into this as much as you want for your own personal thing. I mean, I personally like being generally agnostic / atheist. Like, there was definitely parts of this album where I felt like, okay, dude, I don't need to hear like why I need to be Christian. You know what I mean? You don't. It's a lot of the album I think is valid in that it's really just about his own journey towards like his praise of Christ or whatever. But there is definitely parts where it feels preachy and sort of...
Yeah, all this extracurricular kind of takes away from the album itself almost.
Right.
Well, exactly. And I don't want to dominate the conversation. I think I already made a pretty lengthy point, but I will just say, I guess, again, this entire album just does feel like, not really a personal and intimate reflection on Kanye's, like, spiritual journey. It just feels more like, being Christian's the best. You should be Christian. I'm the best at being Christian. I love being Christian. And I think it's a missed opportunity.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I don't hear that take a lot with people who don't like Jesus is King. A lot of the time I hear, oh, he fucked up, like he shouldn't have even gone down this road. But it's interesting that you think of it as like he maybe had the right idea, like his heart was in the right place, but he just didn't execute it how you would have hoped.
Pretty much. And I will say there are, like, you can, like, feel his, like, jubilation and, like, his, I guess, like, relief at being saved, like, quote unquote being saved. But I don't know if, like, it's a journey that he's matured at all from. And that might not be my place to say. And Colin, I really do think I've kind of cucked you.
Well, you know what? Here's my answer.
So please, like,
I think
shit on me.
I think whenever we get Donda, we'll get the answer to whether or not he's matured through this journey.
That's true.
No, I mean, I think I don't necessarily. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily like fair to judge his music as like, oh, he hasn't done enough introspection for this to be anything for this to be anything more than like a cynical attempt at something, whether that's a cash grab, whether that's converting people, whatever it is. I don't think that's necessarily fair because, I mean, there are plenty of tracks through the rest of his career that are just like, I honestly, I think in a lot of ways, Jesus is King is Christian Yeezus, in that,
yeah, and Yeezus is also controversial
Yeezus,
on its own.
It is a controversial one. For a lot of Yeezus, Kanye's just being like, yeah, I fuck bitches. I have crazy sex. I'm a fucking god. That's what that album is. And Jesus is King is like that, except being Christian's fucking awesome. That's what this album is.
That's the best thing I've ever heard.
If we're gonna go to Yeezus, unless you're gonna go to Yeezus and be like, Kanye doesn't talk enough about the foibles of modern day consumerism on this project, then I think it's kind of disingenuous to be like, there's not enough introspection on Jesus is King, because there's definitely introspection on this album. And again, I mean, getting back to just musical stuff, let's talk about instrumentals. The feelings I evoke from I'm like agnostic, atheist, kind of like Buddhist interested stuff. That's my vibe. The feelings of being a part of the army of God that I get from listening to when the drums come in on Selah, it's like, how can you not be like, for at least 30 seconds, yeah, okay, maybe being a Christian is metal as fuck.
No, yeah. Also,
right?
I mean, just on that point, like the specifically God is, and I mentioned it earlier in the program, but specifically God is the part where he's like, "This my life, this my wife, this my God-given right." I'm like, yeah, all right, I'm a Christian now. Turns out,
yeah. Like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I did have this like really funny image, I think, completely like, again, not related to the music, just stupid on my end, but like of like when the hallelujahs come in, like Kanye West sitting back, like in that way Kanye does, like when he's just like created a masterpiece, like sitting back, hands behind his head, big Kanye smile on his face, and you just like the camera pans down to his sweatpants and there's just a shit ton of piss everywhere. I don't know. like just him like peeing his pants. It made me laugh really hard. Like when and he's like, "Yeah, man, Hallelujah. It's just
I would say that's a really good
peeing his
argument. How
pants.
can you argue against that, Colin? How do you argue
Yeah,
against
Colin.
against Kanye peeing his pants?
How are you gonna refute against him pissing his pants?
Kanye
I don't
pissed
know.
his
I don't-
pants
I-
during the production of Selah. That's true.
I don't know if I can argue with the fact that Kanye did indeed piss his pants while he was producing Selah. But here's another thing I think is actually really cool about I like a lot about Selah. It's like the opening bar on the song. This won't be in bondage to any man, John 8:33. He basically just reads off the John 8:33 Bible verse, which is, they answered him, we be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, ye shall be made free? So, first off, Reddit moment, I'm going to say this is really cool. He flips the ye to a yay. That's bars.
Right.
That's bars. When he goes, yea shall be made free, that's bars.
We're gonna ask one more question before we wanna,
Call it a day.
Yeah, before we want to conclude our final thoughts. But because we have been talking so much about the controversy of Kanye West and how it is so involved in this album, almost in every way, like, you can't listen to this without thinking of his presidential run or of all the stuff he has recently said. It's almost like you can't separate it.
Well, it's a part of the album.
Yeah,
I think,
it
too.
is a part of this
Right.
album. So we have a final question. Would you say it is almost hard to separate the politics from Jesus King? And do you think that it sours the album itself? So do you think that if you just listen to it on its own without taking any context into it, that it improves on it, or do you think it...
Like, if you had no idea who Kanye was and you just listened to this album as a random artist that you had no idea who they were, it was the first thing you listened to them, like, if you had no idea of the presidential context, of the MAGA context, like anything like that, do you think that this album can stand up on its own, or do you think
compared
that,
to other Kanye's albums?
right, or other Kanye albums?
So, I mean, this is a point I'll actually agree with Jake on, and that I think in a vacuum, right? Someone who has never listened to Kanye West before and has no idea about the cultural baggage around this album, I think, yeah, it is probably made for a better listening experience. But where I think kind of the criticism of Jesus is King in its context comes in is a little unfair, is that we actually don't have the full context for Jesus is King in the life and journey of Kanye West. Just like when College Dropout came out, we didn't have the full context for College Dropout yet because we didn't know what was coming next. So we haven't seen the conclusion to, I mean, I'll use some manga anime terms. We haven't seen the conclusion to Kanye West's Christian arc yet, right? We haven't seen the conclusion to it. So we don't really fully know and understand what impact it's going to have on his artistic development, on the people around him, on people in the world. And while yes, I think all of Kanye's albums are individual art pieces in and of themselves, I think Kanye West is an art piece, right? Separated from the man that is Kanye West is an art piece. Kanye West is his own distinct cultural product. Although maybe I don't want to use the word product because I think that implies commercialism, and I don't think that it's a... I don't know. I think there's
you don't want to get into that. That's cool.
Real art.
Right.
Yeah. Kanye West is so he's a continuous, ever evolving artistic project, and I think when you're looking at one of his albums in its own context, I think it's unfair to make definitive judgments of this is how it is right now. We can know and infer for sure that this is a cynical move from Kanye, that this is disingenuous, that he isn't really fully buying into it, because we don't know what comes next. We're not fully appreciating the entire context. No one had the full context for what him going up at the VMAs was going to do until My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
And I'm going to pop in there real quick. Do you think Wash Us in the Blood, Kanye's new project, do you think that that actually helps Jesus King, looking back on it? Or do you think because you said Kanye West himself is a current always an evolving project.
Well, it's interesting because I do think Wash Us in the Blood is better than any song on Jesus is King. Mainly for the reasons that songs like Jesus Walks, Wash Us in the Blood, and I'm going to get into St. Pablo, but St. Pablo kind of contextualize his faith with his life and the world around him. Now, when it comes to, by the way, Wash Us in Blood also just, super fucking cool music video. Super cool, production style. I seriously think, mainly if and when Donda comes out, it'll be a really cool album. I want to talk about St. Pablo for a little bit because I think St. Pablo might be his most Christian song, even more so than Jesus Walks, even more so than anything off of Jesus is King. And probably more so than Wash Us in the Blood. And I think it's because, on that album, on that song, it's him at his lowest point. At his most uncertain, at his most scared, not a friend in the world. He's a new father. He's terrified. And even though it's not him saying, I'm a Christian now, this is me being Christian, I think he's begging and pleading for something to come in and save him. I think that for me, I think it was just so cathartic. And I think when you listen to Jesus is King and you listen to the rest of his discography, you can almost see it as the conclusion, spiritually at least, to an arc that is over 10 albums in the making now. Something that started with Jesus Walks, And I do think even now I'm going to have a Reddit moment as well. But I saw this this kind of really interesting post on 4chan's music board when the album came out. But but there's a pretty interesting post that kind of likened Jesus is King to the end of Kanye's own personal hero's journey, and that being the beginning being college dropout, obviously. In that the hero starts in a place before some adventure calls him and he has to change, right? And the entire idea behind the hero's journey, I don't know every step off the top of my head, but the entire idea is that by the end, the hero returns to a place similar to his beginning, but he's changed in that he's grown. And I do think in a lot of ways, he has returned to a place where he has a family. He's returned to a place where he at least believes in Jesus and God, and he thinks that he can find salvation in that. But I just think if this is that conclusion, which I hope it's not. I hope Donda or Yandi or whatever the hell whatever Yandi would have been, whatever Dondi probably will be. I hope it proves me wrong, and I hope that there's something more resonant, but
right.
I don't know. I just
so you're kind of saying that as an ending to this 2-decade long journey as an artist, it's sort of disappointing in that context.
Yes.
Is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Colin,
in that analysis that I ripped off from 4chan, yeah.
Colin, do you have any dissent before we say our final thoughts?
No. I mean, I'll agree with the message that, I hope this isn't the end for the artistic development of Kanye West. Not because I'm unsatisfied with where we are right now, but because I would be so sad if he were to stop releasing new and innovative music because every single time he puts an album out, it's exciting and new, right? Yeah. There's so few artists, I think, that you can really look at and be every single project released is a new step, a new part of the journey. And if this were the end, I'd be very sad for that reason. I totally agree.
Well, regardless of who won and whoever said things better, you both gave us your time, which means
both of you guys
a lot
were
to
the
us.
master debaters.
Yes.
In my concession speech, I just want to do Infidels era Bob Dylan singing a lyric from this album, and maybe hopefully it could change your guys' mind.
Yeah, let it rip. All
right.
What if Eve made apple juice, man?
Any
I
change
just
of
want
heart?
I just want you to know right now, Jake, that is absolutely not getting edited out. That's staying in.
Cool. I'm glad.
Well, anyways, thank you guys for coming on and talking to us. I know we kind of went a bit over. But yeah, thank you for listening. This has been a Wavezine production. And yeah, have a good rest of your life.
If you enjoyed this podcast, head over to wavezine.com. That's WAVZINE. Or you can check us out on Facebook or Instagram at Wavezine. We post articles daily. We have interviews, performances from local bands in SLO. We also have other podcasts and playlists that we make on our Spotify page, so consider checking it out, and thank you for listening.